Welcome, a very warm welcome to everyone who's joining us here today for our webinar on rethinking digital tools in the classroom. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and let us know where you're connecting from. My name is Joanne Caddy, and I'm very pleased to be moderating today's session on behalf of the OECD's Directorate for Education and Skills. Let me start also by thanking many of you who have sent in questions ahead of time. This has been really helpful because it's allowed us to structure our webinar around the things that interest you. So our webinar today aims to take stock of what we do and do not know in terms of how digital tools can be leveraged in the classroom. We also want to understand what type of expertise teachers and school leaders are going to need to make the best use of these digital tools. And we want to also explore what kind of policies can support their efforts. Before we get started, I really would like to recognize and thank the Government of Ireland's Department of Education and Youth for commissioning this OECD-led study and the team of experts at the University of Stavanger in Norway, who have produced two recently published working papers under the guidance of the OECD team. In terms of methodology, this study involved systematic reviews, meta-analyses, and recent primary studies. So what did our team find? The analysis that we'll go into with much more depth is really around a couple of things. The first one is that yes, if there is significant potential of using digital technologies in primary and secondary education to enhance both teaching and learning. However, their impact on students' learning and motivation relies very much on teachers' practices, their choices, and their competences. So we do need to have careful attention to the purposes of these tools, their timing, how we use them, and their educational objective. What are they supporting as learning outcomes? And finally, our work is looking very carefully at the many challenges. And those are several, including distractions, cognitive overload, digital inequity. And we need to address these so that digitalization can benefit all students. So today we're going to explore these topics in more detail. We're going to rethink how we can effectively use digital tools that are in our classrooms. And to kick us off and to open up this discussion, I'm very pleased to introduce Sanna, Forsström, and Morten, who are both associate professors at the Knowledge Center for Education at the University of Stavanger in Norway. So then after the presentation, we'll also turn to a group of panelists to discuss these issues in more detail. And I'll introduce them after our initial presentation. Please, Sanna, please, Morten, the floor is now yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we are going to present some key findings from the two working papers we've written. And here. So these kind of spring from a need to gain an overall research overview of the digitalization of primary and secondary education. The two working papers have different roles. The first is more technical in nature, presenting results of the impact of different types of students' learning of digital technology. It also discusses challenges, characteristics of successful learning processes based on the systematic reviews we find. The second paper discusses what is needed to realize the potential of the digital tools that we discussed in the first working paper. So these two are connected.
So we follow two guiding questions throughout the processes. The first questions concern the impact of different types of digital tools on students' learning and motivation. The second question is more qualitatively oriented. We discuss when, how, and for what purposes various tools are used in successful learning processes. To address this, we used a review of reviews methodology, meaning that we discussed published systematic reviews on this topic. Through these systematic reviews, we were able to discuss findings from a large number of primary studies.
So we will briefly now introduce examples of benefits for each of the 5 categories of digital tools that are presented in the working papers. And we will highlight those benefits that may be particularly relevant to that category of tools. So we will start with the first.
So based on the findings, programming and robotics have the potential, for example, to enhance computational thinking, problem solving, creativity, and mathematical skills. Programming activities can also facilitate interdisciplinary learning and create opportunities for connections outside of the classroom. The tools can also promote collaboration and communication. And in problem-solving activities with programming, students are able to get more ownership of their learning by giving immediate feedback when they are testing their coding and programs.
Yes, and the second category, media production and literacy. Well, there's a lot of different ways that can go, but we looked at digital storytelling, multimedia authoring, adaptive reading platform, and all these technologies can strengthen literacy by blending storytelling with multimodal learning. With younger students, the benefits are more based on the interactive and visual elements of these tools, while older students engage with more complex, production-oriented activities that promote critical thinking and communication skills. These tools also support creativity and self-expression, and they create opportunities for collaboration and reflection on media content. With gaming, gaming can engage students through interactive and immersive experiences. These can boost motivation, creativity, lead to collaboration, and for instance, in language learning, these game environments can support literacy and vocabulary development by offering meaningful and engaging contexts for practice. But also in other subjects like physical education, there are exergames, or like exercise games. And these have been shown to improve attention, classroom behavior, cognitive skills, and social interaction, contributing to stronger learning outcomes. So across subjects, games can promote self-regulated and collaborative learning, but their interactive features must be carefully designed so that they support learning rather than just distract from it.
And different kind of simulation-based technologies, such as virtual reality, can offer engaging learning experiences that help students to visualize and explore complex or abstract concepts, especially in STEM education. For instance, they allow students to go places that they were not able to visit before, like deep in the ocean, or visiting space, or conducting dangerous chemistry experiments safely. Other kind of simulation tools, such as dynamic geometry software and computer algebra systems, provide possibilities for interactive explorations in mathematics classrooms by supporting reasoning, modeling, and conceptual understanding. Also, in special education, different kinds of tools offer personalized learning experiences through structured interactive activities. And then we have new emerging tools like AI tools and different assessment systems and learning analytics that can support personalized learning by adapting to students' individual needs and learning paths. These tools provide immediate targeted feedback, helping students to set goals and monitor their own progress. They can also contribute to inclusion, providing differentiated feedback that benefits learners with diverse needs and learning challenges. Furthermore, AI and learning analytics tools can promote self-regulated learning as students become more aware of their learning strategies and progresses.
Of course, all these benefits come with recurring challenges that show up across all the tools we discussed. So we're going to go through some examples of this.
So there is a lot of potential, but that sometimes these tools just can be too much and too overwhelming. For instance, some application or digital books may provide too much information for students, or new programming language might feel too complex. These kind of situations can lead to excessive cognitive load. And competent teachers are needed, but if teachers do not have the required competence, challenges may arise. There may also be issues with access to device. Not all countries or municipalities provide one-to-one solutions for their students. In some cases, students and teachers may not have access to the best application, or they don't even know which applications are the best ones. And students are not always able to manage all of the situations by themselves when using these tools. They may struggle to take full responsibility for their learning, setting goals, and develop their skills. Distraction can also be an issue. They might find other things more attractive and interesting than the learning goals and tasks they are working on. And challenges also arise when digital tools are not thoughtfully connected to learning goals and other activities. If tools are not used at a right level for student skills, they may not align with their cognitive and development stages, and leading to ineffective learning experiences. And then it's also that if digital tools are only used and no analog methods are in use, there might be problems. So it's important to balance between analog methods as well. Sometimes paper and pencil are still needed. And finally, there are also ethical risks, such as online safety concerns and lack of clarity regarding digital responsibility.
Right. And so to realize the potential of these tools, the challenges we just covered, and the benefits need to be addressed directly. This means that teachers need to plan with both the benefits and the risks in mind, thinking about when digital tools add value, what the instructional goals are, and what their students actually need. Teachers also have to support students in working more independently, managing cognitive loads, and staying focused in digital environments. None of this happens automatically. It requires deliberate choices and sustained attention in everyday teaching. So if you want to make this work, both teachers and students, they need the right skills. Students need to develop their digital literacy skills, but they also need the ability to regulate their own learning. They need to navigate distractions, and they need to use tools purposefully. And teachers need a solid understanding of what works, when it works, and for whom it works. They need time, resources, and opportunities to collaborate, not just being left alone to figure out complex technologies on their own. And also very critically important, there need to be strong support systems if digital tools are going to be used in a meaningful and sustainable way.
So the key takeaways. There is a lot of potential. There are digital tools enables things that were not there before, but it's not self-evident. The teacher is needed, and but teachers should not be left alone. Teachers need guidance and support, and the role of leaders is central. And it's also important to remember that there need to be balance between digital and analog tools. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much to Sanna and Morten for setting the scene for us all. I mean, that is absolutely fascinating. And your point about the interactivity that digital tools offer, this is truly novel. But also the personalization of learning, not, for every single learner. And indeed, just recently we had a webinar on AI tools for special needs education. And so I hear some things that you were saying. So I really want to thank you both for putting this enormous effort together for the two working papers, but also for distilling it so clearly in such a short space of time. I'm going to now invite our panel members to join us. So I'd like to introduce them. And the first person on our panel is Susan Mulhall. She's responsible for the implementation of digital strategy for schools in Ireland in the Department of Education and Youth. So welcome, Susan, to this panel discussion. Thank you for being here today. I'd like also to introduce to everyone Margus Pedaste. He's a full professor of educational innovation at the Institute of Education at the University of Tartu in Estonia. So welcome, Margus. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce my dear colleague, José Luis Alvarez Galvan, a policy analyst in our Directorate for Education and Skills, and he leads and contributes to international education policy reviews and in-depth country projects. So really a warm welcome to Susan, to Margus, and José Luis. We're going to build now together, we're going to build on what Morten and Sanna have shared with us. And just to get ourselves into a panel discussion, I would like to ask each of you to reflect on an opening question, which is quite general, but to ask you how these findings that Sanna and Morten have shared with us, how do they resonate with what you see in classrooms or schools in your own country? And I think we'll kick off with Susan, if I could turn to you for some thoughts on what you see, given your vantage point.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Joanne. I suppose firstly, just to thank you all for giving me the opportunity to discuss this important piece of work here today. In particular, to thank José Luis and his team, and Sanna and Morten and their team in the University of Stavanger for all the work they put in. Such a comprehensive report, and I really would recommend for those who haven't read it to go through it. We commissioned this. Our minister at the time was just concerned, given the amount of money that was being invested in digital technologies and education, where was the evidence that it was actually working? So I think it's a really important piece of research, and what we're doing now is we're considering it within the department, the relevant areas, and we're going to use it to help inform our future policy in this area. I suppose one thing that strikes me throughout all of this is, while the context is obviously very different in all our individual countries, you can see that a lot of the challenges and indeed the opportunities we face are very similar. So I think this highlights the importance of the work that the OECD do in relation to cross-country collaboration and research. So in terms of what we see in our classrooms, I suppose it's worth making the point we have a very good, very well-respected education system. It does very well in international testing. We also have a very highly educated teaching profession. We have an overarching policy to support the embedding of digital technologies across teaching, learning and assessment, and that's called the Digital Strategy for Schools, and it also has an associated implementation plan. We also have a literacy, numeracy and digital literacy strategy and a STEM implementation plan as well. So I suppose the main finding we took from this technology is, this report, is that the use of digital technology needs to be used purposefully in our classrooms. We have actually already stated that in our digital strategy, that it needs to add value. So there's no benefit to using digital technologies just for the sake of it. And again, I think we all need to realise that, the learner must be always at the centre of this. Another key piece that resonates with us in Ireland is the integral role of the teacher. It's critical that they have the necessary skills and the opportunities for professional development. So to that end, we have a professional development agency in Ireland called IDGE, Technology and Education. So IDGE is like an old Irish word for teacher and tutor. So they develop and deliver professional learning opportunities such as online, face-to-face courses, workshops, seminars, webinars. And they also go out, because we're, that much of a smaller country, they visit schools and provide bespoke school support. They'd also provide support to schools on broadband, ICT infrastructure matters, and of course, internet safety. Their website has a wealth of information, and also they've recently developed a new AI hub. So that's there as well, with resources and supports. Another piece that was referenced there was to have the necessary infrastructure. So we would have funding that issues to schools. Our schools are autonomous. So we issue the ICT grant, issues directly to the schools, and they decide how best to spend that in line with their digital learning plan. Every school has a digital learning plan, and that sets out their vision and their plans for the use of digital technology and sets targets. Inclusion and digital divide, another piece that comes out quite strongly across the reports. So in Ireland, we have a scheme called JESH. So it supports those schools with the highest concentrations of educational disadvantage. So they get additional resources and grants and supports, and they also get an enhanced ICT grant. And just to say, we also receive funding under the NRRP as well. And just, I know we're slightly pushed for time, but just in terms of the challenges, I think one thing it comes across, and Sanna mentioned it there, is the screen time aspect. I think, that at the moment, there's a lot of public discourse around this. We have implemented a ban on mobile phones in primary schools, and there's restriction on use in post-primary. There was funding that went with this to support this. But I think sometimes it gets lost in the public discourse, the difference between screen time, whether it's screen time for learning or screen time for entertainment and scrolling. And I think we need to always come back to that. Key challenge in relation to teachers is for them to have the relevant digital skills. Like I said, our continuous professional development is freely available, but it is not mandatory. So we need to make it accessible for teachers. We also need to give them the time to learn. And just to finish up, I suppose the biggest challenge for all of us, not just for teachers, is AI going forward and where we go with this in our education system. We recently published 2 weeks ago guidance on AI in schools. So that's been quite well received by the system. It's not overly prescriptive. Again, schools are autonomous, so it's up to them whether they want to use AI or not, but it's supporting them in their use and what they need to consider. And then we're also involved with 5 other local authority or 5 other regions in the EU on a technical support instrument on future-proof education, supporting schools in the AI evolution. And that's going to have some interesting outputs in terms of analysis of as-is situations, recommendations for policymakers, and toolkits. And I'll leave it there to let somebody else speak. Thanks, John.
Oh, Susan, thank you so much for kicking us off and actually putting, it's as if you've put all the cards on the table and now we're all looking at all these different aspects already. So thank you so much for that. I'm going to turn now to Margus. If you could, elaborate on this and what have you seen and what do you see in terms of the actual, what's going on the ground. So I'll hand over to you, please, Margus.
Thank you for my colleagues for doing an excellent review. I really recommend reading this review by others as well, and not only looking at the qualitative results what were presented right now, but also quantitative part. Actually, there is quite much interesting information in the effect sizes. I think that this is something sometimes underestimated. So that and I will highlight the importance of the work done, because it's really not just a few studies that have been made, but it is collection and analysis of meta-analysis. So that as it was shown on one of the slides, so that sometimes we can find a study for having evidence for whatever, actually. So, but if you have all the studies, then you can really confirm something on a more general level, and that is something very valuable in this case. Then I wanted to comment on the idea about the value of having competencies for applying digital technologies, including artificial intelligence in education. If you look back to the recent PISA data, then there is made analysis about the number of hours students use technology for learning in different contexts, in school, after school, in the weekend, on the weekends as well. And then there is found also association between the number of hours used, technology is used, and mathematics score. And maybe you do not know, but in most of the countries participating in OECD PISA study, there is a negative association between the technology, the hours spent on technology use, and then also mathematics performance. And what this result shows us is actually that we have to look more carefully how we use technology, not only how much we use, but mainly how we use. And I think that these reports are extremely important in guiding us towards the how question. And in Estonian context, we really encourage teachers to make the decisions taking into account all the contextual factors in their school in order to decide what to use, when to use, and how to use technology, which is very important. Teachers should have autonomy here. We believe in this, that we cannot have simple solutions for complex challenges. And this is, in this context, for example, it is quite easy, at least top-down, to restrict use of technologies. Is it smartphones? Is it AI? And so on. But it's a very simple solution, but it doesn't work, because the kids continue using those smartphones anyway. we have to say, we have to admit that technology is here, and our option is not to teach the kids using those technologies at schools, or teach them to do that. And from this report, I would highlight maybe three potential benefits that really resonate with my understanding and our research in Estonian context. What is important in using technologies? One is collaboration. Technology can really support collaboration and skills to collaborate effectively, because the collaboration is one of the ultimate goals in education, I would say. If we can effectively collaborate, then we can address really big challenges in our society. Are those global challenges like sustainable development related challenges, or peace in the world? By the way, I am currently joining from Hiroshima in Japan, a peace town actually. So that's also resonates with me. Then second point I would highlight is self-regulated learning, which is also very important because if we restrict use of technology in one other way, then we take away the opportunity to learn how to regulate your own use of technology. Of course, we have to guide students. It's not so that we just let them do whatever with technology they have, but we have to guide them towards meaningful use of technology so that they can also decide how to use technology in a way that doesn't distract their learning goals. And the third aspect I would highlight at this point is inclusion and accessibility. So that it is so important that we do not support the inequalities in our society. And this is something that is also increasing in Estonian context, what we see. Inequalities in education, and inequalities are the first step for not understanding everyone, and it is again something that could have the worst outcomes in the end. So I would stop here. I'm happy to discuss further different points. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was a great addition to this conversation. I mean, I'm going to hand over now to Jose Luis for your thoughts on this, but I am encouraged by what Susan was saying, that, the context of each country is so different. There we have Margus, who's joining us from Japan, but is from Estonia. We know that context is absolutely critical, down to the local level, not just national context, but we are encouraged by the fact that putting our finger on shared challenges and shared opportunities. So could you, with that in mind, could you take us through some of your thoughts, Jose Luis, in leading this work? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joanna. Before I go to my response, I would like just to say also that it's a pleasure to be here with you, with Morten, Sanna, Susan, Margus. It's an excellent collaboration, the one we have in this area with you and the OECD team and people also in the countries working with us. So I think what is really interesting in this case is that the working papers that are presented today actually resonate very closely with the work that we are doing at the OECD in this area. I will try to identify at least 3 or 4 major issues that we think, are common to the countries that are working with us in the area of digital education. The first one, I think many people have already before me mentioned this, is that teacher competence is actually, in connection with pedagogical alignment, they remain decisive factors, critical factors for the good use, proper use of digital tools and technologies in the schools and the classrooms. I think there is clear consensus on this issue across all the different countries working with us. The second aspect that is also extremely important, is one of the major challenges that we have even in OECD countries, is that equitable access and infrastructure, they continue to shape outcomes. It is difficult to believe, but actually even in OECD countries, the distribution of these resources and the infrastructure remains to be unevenly distributed. So in that sense, it's extremely important for countries to continue making efforts, to level the field for all the schools and regions that may be in a disadvantaged position. And I think Susan has mentioned some of these initiatives for the case of Ireland. I think also there is a third element that is important for us to mention, is the integration across all the curriculum about the importance of these digital tools and technologies. I mean, what we can see in many OECD countries is that some specific subject areas like mathematics, science, language learning, for instance, are more developed in the way they have integrated these technologies, and therefore we have more information and we're able to assess more closely what's going on in these classes. But in other subjects, I think there is still insufficient information because they are lagging behind in the way that digital tools and technologies are being integrated. So in that sense, this is also an invitation for countries to continue exploring what are the possibilities of these digital tools and technologies with proper evidence-based implementation in all the spectrum of the curriculum base they have in their countries. The final point for me, I mean, in relation to what is relevant from a cross-country perspective, is actually that at the same time that we have some important opportunities with digital education, I mean, the incorporation of digital tools and technologies, they also bring substantial pedagogical, social, and ethical challenges. I mean, some of my colleagues, they have already mentioned this. I mean, they had mentioned, for instance, with Sanna and Morten, issues like cognitive overload, issues of data privacy and security, algorithm bias, cyberbullying. These are issues that are becoming, more and more prominent in the policy discussion, and we are glad to see that countries are taking more serious measures to protect students, but also teachers in relation to these issues. So I think taking together what is clear for us, I mean, in the work that we have at the OECD and in relation to the findings of these working papers, is that there is no single solution for this, that digital tools or technologies by themselves will not transform positively the world of education, but what is needed is this kind of whole package, policy for teachers, students, learners in general, and the system in general to make a better use of these digital technologies in the classroom and the school level. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jose Luis. That's great. I think this first round we've had with this question is really, we've been focusing, haven't we, on the learner at the center. I think Susan had that great formulation that it really has to be the learner at the center. But then, of course, we talked and unpacked a little bit the second concentric circle, which is the teachers that are there to support the learning by the students. But can we now, in this next round, dive a little deeper into the enabling environment? And so I'm going to ask you, each of you in turn, to sort of think about that enabling environment that helps teachers help students. And my question for you is really in two parts. It's about what is the role of school leaders, right? The proximate leaders that are in the school system themselves, but also what is the role of policymakers? And in particular, and we've all pointed to this, balancing innovation, autonomy, but also ensuring equity in access, use, and proper use. So I'm going to open up again. If you don't mind, Susan, I'll turn to you because it's really important, your work in the Irish education system around the school leaders and the policymakers. Could you speak to that? Thank you.
Thanks, Joanne. Yeah, it is, we can't believe in the teachers on their own in any of this. That's not fair. So the culture of the school and the school leader really does play a crucial role. The teacher needs more than the physical device. School leaders need to ensure there's a clear vision and a policy around the use of digital technology in their school, and also that it's developed in collaboration with the teachers and even the students. So there then is a sense of ownership and responsibility around it. That collaborative approach is really, really important. We also feel that school leaders definitely need to be able to encourage their teachers in the professional development area, provide opportunities for peer learning, and give them that flexibility to engage. Very much so, I suppose, that the school leader would lead by example. And then that comes from the school leader, then they're relying, I suppose, on the policymaker and what our role is as a department or ministry. So I think it's very important that as a ministry, we set clear policies and frameworks and that they are aligned. There can be quite a lot of overload for schools and an overload in the system. I suppose key to that then really is the focus, and at the foundation of all of this is digital skills and digital literacy. And if we get that right, then I think everything else will fall from that. So in Ireland, digital literacy and skills are embedded throughout the curriculum from primary and post-primary. There's lots of opportunities for learners to engage with technology, media. We also have curriculum reform is currently underway across all our systems, so from primary and post-primary. And again, that's about ensuring that the learners gain the digital awareness, skills, and critical understanding they need. In terms of supporting equitable access, Our connectivity at the moment in Ireland, we have invested a lot of that in recent years. So our connectivity is quite good in terms of broadband and that type of thing. I suppose schools will always want and need extra funding in terms of digital devices. We don't, as a country or a system, provide one-to-one devices. As I said, the school gets their grant and they decide how best to spend that. We also have, in terms of the inclusion piece and those students with additional needs, we have a separate assistive technology scheme, which is outside of the standard ICT grant, and that provides grants for schools for specialised technology. We also have a National Council for Special Education, so they would have dedicated supports and resources for those students. Another thing we can do as a system or as a policy maker is funded continuous professional development, which you do provide. Make sure that schools, the teachers and school leaders have time to engage with that. And the critical piece in Ireland we have is that we have a very close relationship with our school management bodies and our teacher unions. So we would engage and consult with them regularly when developing and implementing policies. I think that's key to developing any new policy or strategy, or even just on the ground, because they would speak to their members, and then that message comes back to us. It's very much so an importance of support and resources around online safety and the safe and ethical use of the internet. We have an organisation here called WebWise. They're under IGTIE, so they promote the autonomous, safe and effective use of the internet. They have a wide range of training materials and resources available. Again, all freely available, and they also provide supports to parents and students. They also have a youth advisory panel. So again, very important to get the voice of the student participation piece. So when they're developing resources on online safety and internet use, they consult with their youth advisory panel. So for example, on their website, they would have like explainers for parents on different social media games and apps and, things that people of my generation wouldn't necessarily be familiar with. The other area that I think policymakers need to support schools on is the whole area of data protection and data privacy. We have a data protection commissioner here, quite an active one. They have developed a toolkit for schools, but we also have a data protection website, and there's also cybersecurity courses for our school leaders. I suppose in all of this, it comes back down to the critical thinking piece and supporting our teachers and our school leaders. And again, another area is on the disinformation piece. We have a national disinformation strategy. We also have a digital citizenship program. It's currently underway. So what's happening there is that AGA are training teachers, and then those teachers are going out and engaging in peer-to-peer learning to train other teachers on the whole digital citizenship piece. And that very much is focusing on the mis and disinformation piece. Thank you.
Oh, that's great. And you've also brought us back to even these wider societal issues, like what kind of society do we want? How do we, fight against mis and disinformation? How do we have critical citizens and critical skills for our future? Thank you for that. I'm going to ask Margus if you could reflect on these, support roles, the roles of school leaders, but also of policymakers. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I'm happy to do so. So just a week ago, we had in Estonian context a conference in our Estonian Science Academy focusing on making recommendations for policymakers and school leaders. And those recommendations were made in collaboration of researchers, but also policymakers and school leaders, so that we were all there around the tables and then discussing what is needed in different topics, but including also educational technology related topics. And the main message what came out from those discussions is that the school leaders are responsible in building school culture. So that they are the ones who actually build the culture to support effective use of technologies in the classrooms and beyond. Effective use of technologies by the teachers and by the students. In this point, I would also highlight the importance of the concept of agency. So that the school principals, school leaders, they will enable agency for both teachers and students in order to make the best decisions in their more specific contexts. So what kind of school culture? What kind of school culture is supportive in this context? We discussed that it should support openness for testing out different things on their own. Openness for making errors. You don't have to do everything after I don't know, some research or so. You can do your own action research as well. And what is important that you will learn from that. So that we have to ask the school leaders to support the teachers to become learning professionals, professional learners, so that the teacher is not as good as he or she was yesterday if he or she didn't learn something new today. So that every day we have to learn something in order to be successful in our work. So that we have to revise the content of the teacher's profession. It's not only or mainly teaching, it's mainly about learning, or significantly about learning as well. So and how they could support teachers' learning. It is for building structures for collaboration. Very practical might be that we have in the teachers' schedules every week some time for collaboration. Not just voluntarily, but it would be part of our school culture for collaboration, learning communities. And for example, in this context, we can also build some support at the country level. So if I go to the policymakers level, then we understand that infrastructure is very important. That should be enabled at the country level, so that access to different tools, environments, internet. When I jump back to 1990s in Estonia, we had a world famous program, a Tiger Leap program in Estonia that enabled connecting all schools to internet, and but they also enabled to create learning materials according to the national curriculum. And they also support the teacher training, and not only training to use technologies in a technical way, but also pedagogy, how to use them effectively to support better learning and achieving learning outcomes. So that this is very important. And now, this year, we have started in Estonia with a new program, which is supporting AI use in schools. That is called now AI Leap. Maybe you have heard about this, but you can Google and you will find it. Or you can use whatever AI tool now and search for AI Leap in Estonia, and you will learn about this. So, but what is there? There is that at the country level, the Ministry of Education and Research in Estonia also supports by funding, in addition to private companies who also support it, supports getting the licenses, but more importantly, they support professional learning in learning communities, so that teachers from different schools can team up, and in schools, in one school can also team up, and they can also provide guidelines, so that we have our national guidelines for using AI in education, and this is something that could be done at the level of the country. And on the other hand, what is also maybe not so often taught in this way is that I think that at the policymakers level, it is also important not to do too much. I will come back to my point about autonomy, so that trust, and trust. This is something that is sometimes challenging in Estonia as well. So that let's trust the schools and teachers, and let's enable them to apply their agency in their decision making. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much for that, Margaret. You touched a lot of issues, and like the fact we ended up with a delicate balance of autonomy and support from national policymakers. And that's probably a good segue to hand over to Jose Luis. What would you like to share with us to add to our colleagues? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Ioannis. It's a very broad and ambitious question. I mean, my colleagues have already contributed substantially to this, so I will try to condense some of the relevant information based on the cross-country evidence that we have from the countries working with us. I think first going to the level of the school, especially the school leader, but also in terms of other figures that are emerging and becoming important, like, ICT coordinators or digital champions, that they tend to work together with the school leaders. We believe that there are three elements that they bring to the table, I mean, when they work properly. I mean, the first one is the strategic vision. And I think to some extent this resonates with Margus and Susan just mentioned, that in the sense that effective leaders, they make digital transformation part of their school educational strategy. They are responsible for setting clear priorities in the school, allocating resources accordingly, and especially incentivize innovation in the school and in the classroom. The second point is capacity building and collaboration. I mean, also school leaders, ICT coordinators, and digital champions, they are supposed to be providing this mentoring system for teachers in the school to work together and get the most of the use of digital tools and technologies. And finally, something that also resonates a lot with some of the things that, for instance, Margus is very vocal about, is very important to undertake monitoring and feedback in these processes. And school leaders are responsible for this. That means that the strong leadership means regularly reviewing how digital tools are used in the classroom, listening to both students and teachers, and refining strategies accordingly. So now moving to the second part of the evidence that we have now for policymakers, I will try to not to repeat some of the things my colleagues have said, because I can see that there is already a lot of consensus in relation to this. The first one is infrastructure investment. Once again, it's very important for everybody to have reliable conditions like internet connection, adequate devices, and technical support. They remain to be basic preconditions for this system to work properly. The other one, I will not extend too much on this one. I mean, already Susan and Margus have provided a lot of information about this, the proper professional development for teachers. The third one is this meaningful integration of digital tools and education into the curriculum of the classroom and the school system. Something important that I mentioned also in my previous intervention is to have these policy frameworks for ethics, and safety in the school and in the system. I think schools, they really need to have clear guidance from policymakers in terms of data privacy, cyber safety, and responsible use of artificial intelligence for both teachers, students, and also for parents. And I think also Susan has mentioned some of these initiatives in Ireland. And my final point in relation to policymakers would be that they are supposed also to produce this environment for collaboration. I mean, these committees of practice that Margus was presenting, mentoring programs, networks of professionals working together, pairing or matching, schools and teachers that have different abilities and capacities learn from each other. And finally, the last point in relation to this, also one of the tensions that Joanne was mentioning was how to balance innovation and equity in this sphere between what's happening in the classroom and what's happening, at the level of policy making. We think that, like in many other cases in education policy, or probably in any other case for public policy, always innovation and equity, they tend to generate some tension between each other. And we think to alleviate this, at least 3 different points should be considered. One is that from the point of view of the resources, it will be important for countries to targeting investments and differentiated support according to the needs of specific groups, schools and regions, to level up the field for all of them. A second point is having this inclusive design of digital tools that can make this learning more accessible to students with different abilities, but also for those with marginalized communities. And finally, and this is also connected to one of the points raised by Margus, is that we really need to make sure that we encourage innovation responsibly, meaning that we need to incentivize that the schools, experiment with the digital technologies, obviously in an environment that respects, ethical safety environments, and also making sure that if these practices are successful, we have the ability to scale them up to the rest of the system. Thank you.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Between you, you've covered so much ground. We really don't have a lot of time left in our 1 hour together, but I do really want to recognize and thank everyone. There's a very active chat discussion going on, almost like a parallel conversation, which is fantastic. I want to tell everyone that we're keeping note of everything that's going into the chat. But I want to ask the panelists, if I may, and very, very briefly, really very briefly, we've talked about policymakers, we've talked about school leaders. Let's bring it all back down to the teacher and learner relationship, if we can, for a minute, because we had a great question come in beforehand on, how can teachers help students to get the best out of these digital tools for their own learning and helping them navigate the distractions, boost, the self the self-generated, self-directed learning that Margus was talking about. So maybe, Jose Luis, can I turn to you and just say, what if we can boil it down, how can teachers help students to sort of get the most out of these tools in a kind of coaching fashion? What would you say?
I think, we can resonate to some of the things that Margus and Susan were saying, and also these are findings for the working paper. It's very important to provide teachers with this kind of self-regulated environment to facilitate this communication with the students, and also they need to be respectful and attentive to the needs of the students. Something that I think would be very important in this particular case is for them to understand that it's important to see digital tools and technologies as a complementary tool in the classroom, not as a replacement for the other ones. Some of the examples that you can see actually in the working paper is that you can combine, for instance, screen time with paper reading. You can combine virtual reality and simulation with conversations in the classroom. The point is that both groups, teachers and students, they need to see the co-construction of this process and self-regulated activity. They need to know that this is for the benefit of everybody, and it's not something coming, to be imposed no matter what they think or what they need in the classroom.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. Margus, very briefly, what would be your take on that if you have a student and a teacher right in front of you? What are you going to tell them?
Yes, I would highlight self-regulated learning as well. So how to do that step by step, so that we should start already in the kindergarten and continue in the primary school. And then step by step, we can teach the students to regulate their own emotions, in addition to motivation, cognition, and metacognition, so that systematically we have to focus on all those things. But I would add something from our research in Estonian context, a Digi Effect project we had, where we actually approached from the point that OECD PISA data is showing that more is not always better in technology use. And then we wanted to focus on the how question. And this brings me back to the question you just had, John. So, and we found that effective use of technology at the student level is if the tasks where technology is used are either constructive or interactive tasks. And it comes from ICAP framework that differentiates interactive, constructive, active, and passive learning. And those active and passive ways of learning using technologies are not always effective, sometimes even less effective and with negative impact compared to classes where technology is not used at all. But if the use is constructive, so that we first activate our pre-knowledge and then build new knowledge on that, or interactive, where we discuss, again, collaboration, not just personalization, but collaboration is very important for me here, so that we discuss those topics with our peers, then we benefit from the technology use. So that I would highlight personalized, self-regulated learning, but constructive and interactive learning aligned with that. Thank you.
Thank you. That's super concrete. Susan, what would you share on that piece of advice?
Well, I suppose just to add to what Jose Luis and Marcus said there, I think it comes back to the connection between the teacher and the student, and the human connection. I suppose, like, any student who leaves school, you're not, you ask them what made an impact on their schooling and what they remember. They're not going to remember a digital tool. They're going to remember the impact of a particular teacher and how they learned from them, and what they learned from outside of school as well from that person. So I think we go back to the human piece and the human connection. But to encourage, if they're encouraging the use of the digital technology, that it's the engagement piece and the collaboration piece, like Marcus said, and to make it exciting, and that it's not working on a screen on your own, that you're bringing the students together with you and you're showing them how to work together on something and make it innovative and exciting. But again, it goes back to the whole piece of is it adding benefit? Is it adding value? I would think.
Well, thank you so much for bringing the human element back into this key relationship, right? That sets us up for life. We have very few minutes left, so I'm going to do the final kind of reflection round with each of you on this panel. And I'll ask each of you in turn, really in just 1 minute, what excites you the most? We've talked about the risks and we've talked about the challenges, but if you had just one thing that you would like to point to that excites you the most, Margus, can I ask you to just share with us really briefly about these digital tools?
what is the most challenging is if the technology is used in a pointless way. So I would say that we have to start from goal setting and defining the problems we would like to address. So that if we do not have challenges, if we do not have problems, then maybe we shouldn't use technology. Technology shouldn't be always in use. So we also have to wisely decide when not to use technology. Only
Excellent.
if there is really a challenge. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. It's excellent. So wisdom and purpose first, and then we reach for our tools. Excellent. Jose Luis, what would you say to that? What makes you most excited?
It's going to be difficult to be brief on that one, because I think it's very easy to get excited with all these new technologies and the possibilities they offer. But I think, as Margus and Susan were saying, and also with Sanna and Morten intervention, is that at the end of the day, it's very important not to forget what is the purpose of using these digital tools and technologies in the school. Is the purpose of improving, teaching practice and learning outcomes for the students at the end. So in that sense, what excites me the most is, I think, the capacity of these tools, to personalize, engage, connect learning in a constructive, collaborative, and interactive way. I think we need to make sure that this is what happens with technology in the classroom. In that sense, I was just thinking about some quick elements to refresh our minds. That pedagogy must guide technology. We remain vigilant about equity and access issues. That teacher competence and confidence, as Margus was saying, should remain central in policy efforts. And finally, that ethics and student well-being must stay, central aspects of any kind of policy development in this area. I think we are able to put the emphasis on the investment on the human aspect of this process in the same way they are putting some emphasis in the hardware, software aspect of digital tools. I think the potential for this to go in the right direction, I think, is very high. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Jose Luis. Susan, final word to you about your hopes, dreams, and what you think is the biggest potential going forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Joanne. And I suppose no more than what Jose Luis and Marcus to say, like what both excites me and also worries me is that very question, the potential, because like the potential is endless if used in the correct way. And I think it's a good time maybe for us all to take a little step back and ask ourselves the question, what is the role of education here? What do we want for our children and young people when they leave school? Are we educating them to meet particular future skills needs in the workforce? Do we want them to be more holistic, engaged learners with the necessary critical thinking skills? So I suppose these things, they're not mutually exclusive by any means, but I do feel we need to be careful. There's evidence that big tech is playing a larger role in some education systems, particularly in the area of AI. And I believe like education systems should be saying what is needed, and policymakers and the schools and the principals and the teachers, rather than the other way around. So there's absolutely potential with the use of digital technology in education, and particularly AI, but we need to be careful and measured in our approach, and particularly with student data. I suppose I'll finish where I started and to go back to that the learner should be the center of everything we do.
That's a great place to land, and we are coming right up to the hour. Before we close, I'd just like to really thank everybody who has contributed to this excellent conversation. So thank you so much, Sanna and Morten, for this work that you've shared with us today. But a big thanks to Susan and Margus and Jose Luis for making it even come alive for us. I'd like to thank everyone that's joined us here live, and I invite you to sign up for our future webinars as well. So don't miss a single one of them. And we hope you have a good rest of your Friday. And thank you once again for everyone's contribution to this collaborative effort. Thank you so much. Take care.